Good afternoon, everybody, and a very big welcome to you all as we kick off our 2026 live webinars. My name is Taylor Archer, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're starting the year with a conversation that touches all, if not most of us, money and relationships, and how closely the two are connected in our everyday lives. We are fortunate enough today to be joined by Liana Henning, who brings 10 years of banking experience and over 20 years experience in personal finance and financial coaching. Just a reminder for anyone who's here for the first time, the chat box is open, so please feel free to engage with us and pop any questions into the chat for Liana to address during the session. Liana, thank you very much for joining us. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Such a pleasure to be on the line with you today. I think just one or two things that I would like to mention, as much as you can communicate with us in the chat function. I'm also making use of a tool called Mentee Polling. Some of you might be familiar. So please do feel free to participate. There's a link pinned in the chat function, which you can simply click on. And as I move to the next slide, you'll also see a QR code. So if you've got your phone with you, you can also scan that QR code in order to participate. Mentee polling is completely confidential, and it is, of course, just a fun way for me to engage with my audience. So please do make use of that. And just as a reminder, for those of you who already have access to the Kaelo program, it is, of course, confidential. It's at no cost to you. It's available to you and your immediate family members. Reach out through your dedicated access points if you would like to speak to a financial coach. If you may be not yet a Kaelo client, what's stopping you? Please do reach out and sign up. And then, of course, sit back, enjoy the session. We're happy to share the slide deck with everybody following the session, just so that you've got something to refer back to. So our discussion points this afternoon really is about setting the scene. Why do we make certain financial decisions? Is it because of our money memory or maybe our money personality? And how does money impact relationships and, of course, the other way around? Why is it so important to have money conversations, and why do so many people steer away from having those money conversations? But as much as we can understand our relationship with money and how it's impacting our relationships, we also need to learn the skill on how to set certain financial boundaries. And I'll be touching on some of those boundaries this afternoon and how we could potentially set them. Help is at hand. Remember, reach out, speak to a financial coach. We are here to support you, but we truly believe that you're going to find the session insightful and that you would be able to implement some of the tips and tools that we will be sharing with you. Wonderful to see that so many of you are already participating on Mentee. How is 2026 treating you? We're seeing some of your responses coming in. There's good, there's blessed, so far, so good, promising, awesome. But then some of you are also saying it's a little rough. It's been full of changes. There's lots of opportunities. Someone is saying, I'm unsure at this point in time. Maybe ask me again 2 weeks from now. But thank you so much for your participation. Just as a reminder, please have a look at the meeting chat. We've pinned the Mentee link. You can simply click on it, or you can scan the QR code. And I'm loving your responses in the meeting chat. Some of you are also saying, you know, it's fired up. I'm feeling blessed, all good. Good so far. So that's very positive to see. Thank you so much. And of course, as we progress, the questions will be more relevant to the content that we are covering. This is just your icebreaker so that you can see it is completely confidential. So please do feel free to participate. But I do want to ask the question, you know, no matter what your income status is, your relationship status, of course, money is one of the topics that can very quickly turn a relationship upside down, whether it is that relationship with your partner, your spouse, your family, your friends. It can very quickly turn into a stressful situation. And I think the reality is that the main reason is that we don't like talking about money. So today I'm doing all the talking. I'm very passionate about finances, but I hope that through the content today, you will then also realize that it's not a taboo subject. It is time to talk about your finances and, of course, identify who you need to talk to. Now, where did it all begin? Because I think it is important just to unpack and understand our personal relationship with money and why do we make certain financial decisions. And very often it can stem back to some of the money management habits that you picked up growing up as a child from your parents, from your caregivers. It's also important to ask the question, when you started working or when you earned that first, whether it was an allowance or pocket money, did anybody sit you down and say, okay, so if you've got this as your income, what is the plan? What is the goal? What expenses do you have to cover? And did anybody talk to you about planning for your financial future? Did you have a role model? And for me, it's never too late, whether it is maybe a partner or spouse that's acting as that role model, or maybe there's a financial mentor or a coach. It's simply just by reaching out and having that conversation. But I also want you to think about, your history with money and some of the previous decisions that you made around money and what was the outcome. Because very often from a financial coaching perspective, people might say, yes, previously I made really poor financial decisions and that has now led me to believe that I don't have the skill or the ability to grow or to make informed financial decisions. And of course, that's not the case. I truly believe there's no such thing as a mistake. It's all about the lesson and how do we move forward. And as long as we don't repeat that situation, we're growing, right? So on Menti, I would like to ask the question, where does your money management habits stem from? Is it maybe from a parent or a caregiver? Did you have a mentor? Is it from a partner or a spouse? So if you've participated in the first question, it will now refresh and it will give you an opportunity to vote. If you've just joined us, just as a reminder, please have a look at the chat function. There's a Menti polling link pinned. You can simply click on the link and it will take you through, or you can scan the QR code and that will allow you to participate as well. It looks like we've got about 38, 39, 40. The number keeps on changing. People participating. All of those responses will be pulling through as we progress. So interesting. Many of you are saying, well, my money habits stem from my parents. And I think I can relate to that, growing up in a household where both my mom and dad used to work. I remember so clearly at the end of the month before payday, they would maybe sit around, have this conversation, what's coming up this month that's out of the ordinary. And they got paid by check. So that just tells you how many years back that will go. And I remember on that payday weekend, we would go off to the bank. They would go and cash in their salary checks, go back home, sit around the dining room table, and they worked with an envelope system. So every envelope was allocated towards a specific payment. And I remember so clearly there was one for rent, one for groceries, school fees. Every now and again, if there was maybe a birthday or a celebration, that would then go towards that discretionary item. But that for me was such a reminder when I started working and generating an income. Immediately I thought, okay, how am I going to distribute this money? But I also remember very clearly, Mom would say, towards month end, if I opened the fridge and, for example, I would say, Mom, there's no tomato sauce, we're having booty rolls. She would say, wait until month end, we'll go and do the grocery shopping then. So yes, it's wonderful how these little stories actually come back to me. And I'm hoping you've got similar types of stories. But we also need to think about that relationship, growing up, seeing that so many of you indicated that it was a parent or a caregiver. What was the situation growing up? And for some of you on the line, it might have been a very easy situation where money was never a problem. It was in abundance. Whenever you asked for something, you received it. But for some of you, it might have been a very different situation where maybe it caused a lot of conflict, and you often heard your parents or your caregivers fighting around money. And whenever you asked for something, the response was always no, or wait until month end, or whatever the situation might be. And I want you to think about how those conversations could potentially have an impact on the way that you are making certain decisions today. Either it's that you're very careful and you plan around your finances, or it could be to the extreme where, because it wasn't in abundance growing up, you might now be splurging and overspending because you might be of the opinion, well, I never had enough, or the wants that, I was looking for growing up, and now I'm overcompensating. So very interesting to think about it in that way. Now, your money personality, together with your financial habits growing up, of course, could have an impact on the way that we make certain financial decisions. Now, in the financial coaching world, we often refer to the following type of money personalities. It's either the saver, the spender. We talk about the avoider, or some people refer to it as that ostrich mentality, where you don't want to face the reality. But ultimately, we are working towards that money mentor and money investor, because they live by two simple rules. They will never spend what they don't have. So, of course, their expenses won't exceed their income. And they pay themselves first. So what that means is when that salary gets paid into the account, the very first thing they do, the first line item, is going towards saving. So I want to paint the following scenario, and we can then kind of unpack some of the money personalities. Let's pretend you are out and about with your friends, having drinks, having dinner, and the bill arrives. What is your natural response to that particular situation? And we're going to vote on that very shortly on Menti polling. But this could potentially give us an indication, whether you are avoiding the situation, whether you are naturally a spender or that saver, or if you are maybe taking a balanced approach, like the money master or the investor. There is, of course, different types of money personalities as well, where they're constantly worried about their finances, worried about their financial future. There's the security seeker. They don't necessarily want to spend too much because they believe that their security is based on the value in their bank account. And then there is the treasure hunters, the bargain hunters. They're constantly looking for those specials, but is it truly a special? And then, of course, some people are saying, well, they've got kind of like a one-night stand relationship with their pay slip. They get paid, or with their salary. They get paid on the 25th, and by the morning of the 26th, it's magically disappeared. And some people are constantly seeking, that validation in terms of their financial situation. But as much as we need to try and unpack and understand our money personality, and maybe some of you can giggle based on the previous slide, and maybe you've identified some of your money personalities, I also want you to think about this, whether you're in a relationship or whoever is financially dependent on you. It could be a partner, a spouse, it could be young adult children, extended family members, elderly parents. Think about their money personalities, because I guess that's very often where a lot of the arguments and conversations could stem from. If you're in a relationship where you're a natural saver, but your partner or the other person is maybe a spender, it could cause a bit of conflict. Now, there's other words that we link to it. There's the squirrel, and if you think about the squirrel, what do? They gather and they hold on. There's the dinosaur. Another description for it is that they've got very short arms. They can't reach their pockets to contribute or to pay. There's Mr. Flash or Miss Flash, flashing those credit cards and that wallet, leaving it on the table. So different types of descriptions to these money personalities. Now, remember, my question was that you're out and about with your friends and you're having dinner, the bill arrives. What is your natural response? Would you say, put away your wallets, I'll settle the bill? Is it maybe, let me pay for my share, let's split the bill equally? Or are you that avoider where you're saying, please excuse me, I'm going to the toilet or the bathroom? Looking at your responses, it seems like we almost have a tie, but things keep on changing. There's pay for your share, split the bill coming up strong. Some of you are saying settling the bill, thank you. And then I'm not having anyone saying, please excuse me, I'm quickly going to the restroom, or I've been waiting for this phone call the whole day, let me quickly take it. And they only come back once the bill has been settled. So if you would like to participate on Menti, just as a reminder, have a look at the meeting chat, click on the link, scan the QR code, and as you can see, it is completely confidential and just a fun way for me to engage. I'm also keeping an eye on the comments coming in the meeting chat. Keep them coming. Thank you so much. It's lovely to see your engagement. So what would you do? I think we can comfortably say that most of our participants are saying pay for your share. Then that's followed by split the bill, and then of course settling the bill. And at this point, I'm so sad not to see who is saying settling the bill, because I would love to become your friend. Happy if you want to send me an email or a message. So thank you so much for your participation on this particular question. Now, why is it important to understand our partners or the people that we are in a relationship with, their money personalities, and why do we need to talk about money? Now, to explain this concept a little bit further, I'm going to share this quick video clip with you. I'm switching off my camera just to ensure good network quality, but if you could please just give me the thumbs up that the sound and visual is pulling through. Let's watch.
You know how your partner likes their coffee, what love language they speak, and even their medical history. But how much do you know about their finances? Chances are, you and your better half are among the 78% of people who would rather share their full dating history and all of that drama and all of that baggage that comes along with it, rather than to disclose your full financial history. And yet, research shows that your significant other has a large influence on a whole host of your behaviors. Understanding how they handle money is a great way to prevent strife and misunderstandings. In fact, financial disagreements rank as the strongest predictor of divorce. So my tip here is that if you want to strengthen your relationship, it's time to talk about the money. You might be thinking, my partner and I don't need to talk. My partner takes care of the money, or vice versa. But a 2018 study of heterosexual couples showed that in these situations, the partner who takes on all of the responsibility, the one who manages all of the financial tasks, they become more and more proficient in financial management over time. But the other person, the person who has given up all of their financial responsibilities, their financial management capabilities decline over time. And what if something happens? Maybe you break up, maybe it doesn't work out, or God forbid, maybe your spouse dies too early. If the person who wasn't responsible for the money management ends up on their own, that person oftentimes struggles to regain their financial skills, making it more and more difficult for them to navigate the world alone. And 75% of the time, it's the women who outlive the men. For the partner who hasn't taken on the money management role, it's like forgetting a foreign language. When you stop using it, you lose some of your ability to understand and communicate in it. But if you keep that financial immersion going, so does your fluency. Being open about your finances can be very scary, but it can also be very rewarding. Experiments have shown that shared vulnerability establishes a greater sense of trust, cooperation, and intimacy in relationships. So to get you started, I, along with a couple of colleagues, developed a list of 10 conversation starters. Here are just 3. Number 1, what are your long-term financial goals? What do you want to accomplish together? Number 2, how do you measure your financial success? Is it a house with a white picket fence, or is it having the ability to live anywhere around the globe? Number 3, what's the one thing you wish your parents would have done differently financially? As a university study found, it's important to answer these questions together because joint decision-making, making decisions as a couple, oftentimes results in taking fewer risks that in turn can lead to higher savings. Now, I'm sure you intuitively understand that open, honest conversations with your better half are beneficial. And I understand that it's difficult to get started. especially when talking about money. But a great first step is just to put some time on the calendar so that you two can have a nice financial chat. Take out your phone right now. Set the calendar invite. Your future self will thank you. You know.
So it is, of course, very, very important to talk about money. We know that, and we can see that in this little video, but it's how do we actually start? And, you know, to share with you, I've been married for many, many years, and obviously I'm in the financial industry. I have been for many years, but my husband is more on the creative side, and he doesn't like talking about money. So when I do have his attention and we're talking about money, I've got to make sure that it is interesting, it's visual. So our budget will have little color codes and, of course, you know, something to keep his interest. So we've got to do what we've got to do at the end of the day, because we do need to get on the same page financially, working towards the same financial goals, and of course understanding what would be some of those challenges, what would be his fears, for example, around our financial situation, and how do we work together in terms of achieving our financial goals. Now, yes, love and money is real, and of course we are in that month of love, but sadly we also know that some of the most common causes of disagreement is around money. So I want you to think about this question. What's one thing you wish people talked about more openly when it comes to money and relationships? You know, when it comes to that financial conversation, and maybe reflecting back, growing up, what do you wish? In that video, she said, you know, she wished that her parents make better and more informed financial decisions. So what can we actually take from that? And we've got to understand that we are dealing with people, different money personalities, different attitudes, different goals, and different financial futures. But somewhere along the line within our relationships, we do need to get onto the same page financially. So my question to you on Menti is, have you ever faced a situation where a financial disagreement affected your relationship? And that doesn't have to be with your partner or spouse. It could be overall. You know, we are surrounded by so many people, so many loved ones. It could be a sibling where maybe you didn't agree around something. We're seeing your responses coming in, and many of you are saying yes frequently. Some of you are now saying yes occasionally. And we've also had those of you saying no. You know, thankfully, I've never been in a situation where it has impacted my finances. Now, you'll hear many people say, as a rule, business and pleasure, so your finances and friendship shouldn't mix, or you would say business and family shouldn't mix. And yet some people do this very successfully. Close friends being in business, siblings being in business and being very successful. But I do think that there's a golden rule around it, and it is about having those hot conversations. Talking about money is not necessarily sexy, but it can be hot. And the hot stands for that honest, open, two-way conversation. So thank you so much for your participation. I'm also mindful of the comments coming in on the meeting chat. So yes, we know very often relationships can be affected by money, whether it is different attitudes, maybe it's just that little thing that's irritating you, or maybe it's just about not knowing how to set those financial boundaries and having those conversations. I guess as we progress through the conversation this afternoon, I really would like you to think about what is it that within your relationship is impacting the relationship due to finances. Jot that word down, maybe it's one or two things, and then have a look at how can you actually approach this in order to improve the situation. Now, we also need to think about the different levels of financial responsibility in a relationship. And you'll remember in the video, she spoke about who is taking the lead, who's handling more of the financial decisions, and then, of course, the dangers around that. And we're going to focus a little bit on that as well. But I want you to also reflect on this question. Do you think money problems are usually about money, or could there be an underlying problem? Because we could easily quote it by saying it is financial, but there could be an underlying concern that is leading to the disagreement. Now, control, power, and money is definitely something that we need to think about. And we know that money could potentially be powerful. And if you've got a very strong financial personality, that could, of course, also be a bit of a problem in a relationship. So maybe you've heard about the term economic abuse. And economic abuse is really where one of the partners or the spouses or the person in the relationship doesn't have control over the financial decisions. We often see this where maybe the salary would be paid into their account. From there, it's transferred into the partner or spouse's account. They're not involved in the financial decisions. They feel they don't have the skill or the ability to contribute. And sadly, what happened is slowly but surely they start losing control over the financial situation. Now, we often see this in a financial coaching scenario where they might be thinking that everything is taken care of. There's policies, there's retirement, there is sufficient protection elements. And when the partner or spouse then passes away, leaving the one behind that may be passed on that control, they're left in a situation where they then find out, but policies have been cancelled, there's no retirement funds, there's no life cover. Very often there's a lot of debt that's been accumulated, and they find themselves in a severe, difficult financial position. So it is very important to be part of these conversations. It's part of skilling yourself, asking questions, being involved. And that's why we're so passionate about financial literacy and helping people make informed financial decisions. But I also want you to think about this question: who should handle the money in a relationship? Is it one person? Is it both equally? Or is it whoever cares more? And I would love your comments in the meeting chat. But definitely, there's no one size fits all. I think it all depends on the relationship. But very important to think about this question. Now, it all comes down to communication. And I want you to think about it. How easily do you communicate with your partner, with your loved ones, those that's in your circle? And I guess very often we'll get the response, we don't talk about money because it's a very touchy subject. And there could be a number of reasons why. But let's find out on mentee polling. How do you feel? How comfortable are you discussing finances with your partner? And some of you might be saying, I avoid it, not comfortable, somewhat comfortable. I'm going to remove that QR code just so that we can see that response. Very comfortable. I'm also keeping an eye, on that previous question, who should be taking control of the finances? And many of you are saying both equally. So thank you so much for your responses here. Ideally, we should do it equally. Thank you. So taking a look at your responses, I'm somewhat comfortable, 22 of you, not comfortable, 6 of you, and 10 of you saying very comfortable. So I'm leaving this question open and active so that you can continue to vote. Thank you so much. So it really shouldn't be a taboo subject. Long gone are the days where we're avoiding it. We know historically there's a couple of topics that people don't like talking about, but really finances shouldn't be one of it. And we know that often someone in that relationship might feel that their income is linked to their self-worth. And if they may be not on the same income level as the partner or spouse, they might feel that they've got less to contribute. But let me tell you, your opinion, your view, your decisions are just as important because it will be impacting both of your financial future. Now, it's not just about having this conversation with our partner or spouses. It's also around having these conversations with whether it is friends or parents. And I want you to think about some of these scenarios. Let's go back to that mentee question. You're out for dinner and the bill arrives. How comfortable are you to speak up and say up front, what are we doing? Are we splitting the bill? Are we paying for our share? Or is this an invitation where you are inviting us and you're paying because there's a celebration or whatever the case might be? Maybe you're getting that phone call a couple of days before payday. and you've been monitoring that bank balance, and you know you only have enough money available to really get you to the next payday. But now you get this phone call from a friend saying, you know, are you in? Meet you at this restaurant in the next 20 minutes. What do you do? Do you feel comfortable to say, thank you for the invitation, but maybe next time, I didn't plan for this? Or are you very keen and you immediately say, yes, thank you, I see you there, and on your way you quickly go onto the banking app and you apply for that month-end short-term loan because you didn't feel comfortable voicing where you are in terms of your financial situation? Taking it back to your relationship, whether it is with your partner or your spouse, do you know what their income is? Do you know what the debt commitments are? What are their financial dreams, their aspirations? And then, of course, do you feel embarrassed around your current money situation and where you find yourself on your journey? I will never forget years ago when I was still very involved in financial coaching myself. I had this coaching session and this lady came in super excited. She just got engaged over the weekend, so I was very happy for her. But that excitement very quickly turned into tears, and I couldn't understand it. I said, what's going on? And she said, I cannot have an open conversation with my fiance. I'm currently so over indebted. I've got a judgment against my name. And we've already started speaking about our dreams and buying and financing a property together. And I don't know how he's going to respond if I tell him that I've got so much debt and that I currently have a blacklisting against my name. So it's so important to have those conversations. But I think for many people, it's difficult. Where do we actually start? So it is about whether it is the couple that's on the same page, whether it is the financial dependent. I'm finding myself in the life stage where I now need to have those money conversations with my young adult daughter. She'll be 22 soon, her sister being in matric, and having those conversations and saying, well, this is what we are responsible for. If you are earning an income, what can you contribute? So it kind of brings a different dynamic. And I think that's why it's important to really think about the question, when do we start having these money conversations with our kids so that we do have financially savvy kids and they're not concerned and worried talking about their finances? Now, on the call, I've noted it looks like we're about 160 people, could be slightly more or less, but where do you find yourself in your financial life stage? Because it's important to have these conversations, whether you're single and starting out, just starting with your career, what type of financial decisions do you need to make? Maybe you've progressed, you're thinking about commitment. What do you need to discuss with your future spouse or partner? Maybe you're juggling commitments, taking care of extended family members. Who do you need to sit around with? Is it your elderly parents? Is it siblings? Is it extended family members? And then, of course, if you're in that life stage where you are nearing retirement, what do you need to discuss and who do you need to discuss this with? So very, very important. So I want to share with you just quickly the high five around starting with a money conversation and how this could potentially impact or benefit the relationship. So it is about the introduction. So as much as you are attending this conversation this afternoon, don't rush home this evening. And when your partner or family members arrive home, immediately say to them, sit down, we need to have a money conversation. First of all, it might not be the right timing. They're tired, they've had a long day, and they've got no idea where this is coming from. You'll be blindsiding them because they might not be aware that you have attended the session today. So softly introduce by saying, I've attended this session and I've realized that we don't really discuss our financial situation, our goals, our dreams, our concerns. Would you be open to having this conversation? And then maybe agree on a time over the weekend where it's quiet over a cup of coffee, and then think about what is it that you want to ask. And start by asking the questions, what's your money memory? What do you think your money personality is? And what would be some of your goals? But remember to also pause and to listen to what the person is saying. If there is maybe areas that there's disagreements, how can you move forward? And maybe you need that money mentor or that coach to intervene and to have that conversation. But it is important then to also close the loop and to realize that it's not going to be one quick conversation and that's the end of it. You almost need to set it up by saying, how often do we need to have this conversation and what is it that we are trying to achieve? Now, as much as money can have an impact on our relationships, we also need to think about some of those boundaries that we need to set. And the reason why I'm bringing this into the conversation is that very often relationships can have a severe impact on a financial situation and the other way around. So financial boundaries, of course, is a guideline or it's a couple of rules that you need to look at in order to protect your financial well-being and in order to ensure that you're on track, you're achieving your financial goals, and of course, you share this with the other person. So this is really where you want to set clear limits as to what you can actually afford and what you can spend, whether it is on contributing towards the household, maybe assisting an elderly parent or a sibling, but it's also about making sure that you protect your financial health by not overcommitting, overspending, by becoming reliant on debt because you're trying to help the other person. And it's about those clear expectations and sitting them down and say, I'm happy to support and to help you, but within reason. This is what I can support you with. And I think also to be very mindful around the pressure that we often find ourselves under and learn how to say no. And I'm going to share some of those steps with you. But it is about that honest conversation and not shying away from it. And of course, when your no is your no, not to actually then turn that into a yes. So I do want to ask the question, when you think about your financial situation, who are you responsible for financially? And when I look at some of the statistics, we know that many households are responsible for 6 or 7 financial dependents. So maybe you can relate. You're earning that income. You might be the only one in the household earning that income, and you've got 5 or 6 financial dependents or multiple generations that you are supporting. How difficult are you finding it to actually then say no? So let's listen to this quick reel and then we'll continue.
Here are the 4 ways to say no and stick to it. Number 1, practice makes perfect. It's a skill to say no. So you want to practice this in all the little ways. When I'm getting my legs waxed, they're always trying to sell me an exfoliant too, and I just say no thank you. So practice it everywhere you can, even in the little ways, so it's easier to do in the big ways. 2, research shows that if you make a plan before a situation for what you're going to say, you have a better chance of sticking to it. So practice even there about what you're going to say before a situation comes up, and you'll have a better chance of sticking it out. 3, I'm saying things like, I'm not putting anything else on my calendar right now. Give a pause. Check back with me in a month. Check back with me at the end of the year. Check back with me later. Put it on them. And last, no is a complete sentence. No need to justify or explain. Follow me for more tips just like this. Here.
So I think really, just learning to actually say no and not feeling guilty afterwards or over-explaining. And I'm interested to know from our attendees, do you think it's important to set financial boundaries in relationships? Some of you immediately saying, yes, absolutely. It depends on the situation. Maybe some of you would say, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary. So think about, once again, your current situation. Who is financially dependent on you? Where are you contributing? Where do you need to have those conversations? And remember some of those tips that I've shared earlier on. How do you start with that conversation? So I'm leaving this question open and active so that you can continue to vote. But it clearly indicates that many of you feel that you do need to set certain boundaries. So thank you so much for your participation. We know it's not always easy saying no, but I want you just to tap into your feelings for a little bit and ask yourself, how do you feel when you say no? You know, do you feel guilty? And then if you do say yes, do you then have regret afterwards? Because now you're placing yourself in a difficult financial situation. Have you ever been in a situation where maybe someone asked you for money and you know that you couldn't really afford it and you were really relying on getting that money back, and then it caused conflict because every single time you ask, you know, can I get this money back? There's no response, or they're avoiding you, and now there's that regret, and there is that feeling of, why did I ever agree to this? Now, very important to always ask yourself, if I'm helping this person financially, how is it going to impact my financial situation? How is it going to impact my relationship? And many years ago, someone said to me, you know, don't ever agree to support or lend money if you're expecting to get it back, because if you don't get it back, how is it going to impact that relationship? And I've seen so often, personally, from a financial coaching perspective, how finances can potentially have a negative impact on relationships. So our next mentee question is, how does money impact your relationship? So whether it is with your partner, your spouse, or whoever it is in your circle. This one is slightly different compared to the other questions. It is a word cloud, so it's going to allow you an opportunity to type that word. So I would like to hear from you. How does money impact your relationship? I'm going to give it a couple of seconds just to allow your responses to come through. And of course, if you're comfortable, you can also pop them into the meeting chat. Thank you so much for all of the comments coming in the meeting chat. Some of you are saying, so important to set these boundaries up front. It just makes the conversation so much easier. Got to be tough and stand firm on your no. I hear you. Thank you so much, Nelly. And then never lend money to family. They never pay it back, Naledi. Thank you so much for sharing that comment. Taking a look at some of your feedback on Menti. How does money impact your relationships? It brings up conflict, but can also be rewarding. It's got a negative impact. Get tense sometimes. Someone is saying, can't always show up the way I would like. It complicates them. I've learned to put in a place money boundaries, period. Full stop. Don't ask me. Thank you so much for your responses. Someone else is saying trust. It can definitely have an impact on trust. So thank you so much for your participation. And some of you are also saying negative, feel guilty, there's regret. So thank you so much for those responses. So this is what I want you to think about. When do you need to set these boundaries, and how do you know you need to set these boundaries? Well, think about this. Are you feeling annoyed when others place these demands on you? Are you then worried about your financial situation? You're losing sleep because you're worried. Do you feel burned out because you're being pulled in so many different directions and your relationships are suffering? And then, of course, how can you potentially move forward by simply saying no? So setting these boundaries, you know, is important. And I'm going to share with you a couple of things to consider. But before we get to that, I want to create a couple of scenarios, real life scenarios. And I want you to think about a time or an experience in your financial life when you needed to set some financial boundaries. And yes, you guessed it. This session is engaging. I would like to hear from you. Who do you feel you need to set a financial boundary with? And this links into that previous question where think about that scenario where you had to set those boundaries, whether it is with that friend, it could even be a colleague, it could be a partner or a spouse or that young adult children. Someone is saying myself. So thank you so much for your honesty, because yes, we also need to have that discipline to say, I cannot overspend, be careful, be mindful. What are you doing? Are you working towards your financial goals? How are you going to achieve them? And looking at some of your responses, lots of mixed responses coming in from family and friends to siblings to partner to parents coming in, a spouse and my sister. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. There's also other responses coming in, parents. And Agatha, I hear you in terms of parents, you know, for many years, I found myself in a situation where I supported both my elderly parents. So we talk about that sandwich generation, where you work, you earn the income, you are taking care of your own needs, taking care of the needs of your kids, and then the elderly parents. And the squeeze in the middle is becoming increasingly tight. And I remember I had to be really firm in terms of taking a look at what, as a young family, can we contribute to support my elderly parents, and having that conversation with them. But I also remember many a times where mom or dad would phone and say, but we've had this unexpected medical emergency, or this medical bill has not been paid, or this doctor's visit has not been paid, and in order to see the doctor again, we need to pay for it. And really then to have a look and see, how can I support further, and to say, you've got to try and work within that framework, of what we've agreed on. And it's hard. It's hard as a child having that conversation with an elderly parent, but it is very, very important. So thank you so much for your participation. I want to share this quick video with you before I share different scenarios. And I know, in order to wrap up our session, I'm going to maybe use another 10 minutes going through this conversation and these points, and then we'll address some of your questions. But let's watch.
I used to be one of those people who had the disease to please. I said yes many times when I knew I should have been saying no, and then I would be mad at myself for saying yes. You say yes, then you're mad when they come back again. Because when you say yes, when you really mean no, people follow the intention of the yes. Because why do you say yes? You say yes because you don't want the person to be upset with you. They're not. You don't want the person to be angry. You want the person to think you're nice. They do. And that is why they keep coming back. Nothing is showing up in your life that you didn't order there. If it's there because you needed to see it. So how do you set boundaries for yourself? I was having trouble setting boundaries for myself for even strangers. So what I learned is that the reason why people keep showing up is because my intention is to make them think that I'm such a nice person, that you can ask me for anything, you can get me to do anything, I'm going to say yes, I'm going to say yes. So many times you will have angst and worry about things, and you will put yourself in a state when the other person really isn't even thinking about you. So learning that I could specifically determine for myself what the boundaries were for me, what I wanted to do, give my money, give my time, give of my service to who I wanted to give it to when I did, that I get to make that decision. And just because you get 100 requests a week doesn't mean you have to try to fulfill all of that. Just because you have all of these demands on your time and on you doesn't mean that you have to say yes. You get to decide because you're the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. And understanding that really changed the meaning of my life, in that I was no longer driven by what other people wanted me to do, but took charge of my own destiny, making choices based upon what do I feel is the next right move for me.
So it really is about that feeling, how are you feeling when someone is approaching you for money? Are you going into that people-pleasing mode where you don't want to say no because what is this person going to think about you? Remember, what is your next move that's going to help you achieve your particular goals? And how do you feel when you're saying no? Does it come easily? Do you feel you have to over-explain? Do you need to give a reason? And do you then maybe regret or go back on that no later on? We can potentially practice this with some of our family members, whether it is with your child. Do you often maybe say no to a request and then you go back on that word? We also need to think about what lesson are we then teaching if we do that. So some of you are saying, I'm feeling uncomfortable feeling anxious, feeling a little bit guilty. There's more responses pulling through easily now through practice. So practice make perfect, as they say. Thank you so much for your participation. There's confident, no guilt. Someone is saying there is, I don't mind saying no. Guilty is coming up, and uncomfortable is the biggest word, because that means that many of you are using that word. So thank you so much for your participation. So how do we move from saying yes to no? And whether it is to extended family members or to whoever it is that we need to do that, practice saying no. It's okay. It's a full sentence, as we've mentioned in some of the previous slides, and then stick to that word. I love this quick little reel about vitamin N, and you might say to me, where can I buy this? But let's watch. What is vitamin N?
When you say self-discipline, what exactly do you mean by that?
The rule number one is to get vitamin N.
Vitamin N.
Yes. That's the rule number one. You need to inject yourself with vitamin N.
N is for?
N is to learn to say no. That's a vitamin. Yeah. That's how to get self-discipline. Secondly, is setting up priorities right. Thirdly, is avoid complaining. Those are the three factors we can lead you to self-discipline.
Love that, short and sweet. And when I watched this the first time, I thought, where can I get this vitamin N? Can I get it from Distem? But remember the reason why you are saying no. It's because you want to protect your own financial well-being. You want to define what it is that you are working towards. And of course, it might require a bit of practice for some of you. It might not come easily. And very often it then also helps you to think about those reasonable requests. Are they really reasonable? Are they being unreasonable? And is it really worth my while feeling very guilty around the situation? So to wrap up on this segment, remember it's about identifying who you need to set that boundary with. Clearly communicate why you are doing this, but you don't have to go into too much detail. Don't over-explain, and think about the consequences if you do agree to that particular demand and how that is going to impact you. I think we're almost getting to the end of our mentee questions, but I do just want to ask you, how do you set those boundaries with family? Is it about having those conversations? Is it maybe where you simply just say to them, no, I can't help you. I've got my own financial needs that I'm taking care of. I'm going to allow you to vote. But whilst you vote, I do maybe just want to touch a little bit on some of these scenarios. And this is something that we very often see. And I want you to think about it. If Thandi approached you, what would you potentially say to her? So she's a 40-year-old. She's married with 2 kids. She's currently supporting her immediate family, her mom, her siblings, her extended family members. And her goal is that, yes, as much as she wants to help everyone, it leaves her feeling very stressed and very anxious. So what would you maybe recommend to Thandi? And if you want to give some of that guidance in the meeting chat, please feel right ahead to do that. But I think from a financial coaching perspective, when I think about Thandi, it would really start with, what is the income? How much do you have? What are you working with? Take a look at your immediate family and the financial needs that you need to cover, your fixed expenses, your variable expenses, and then ask yourself the question, why have they all become financially reliant on you? Is there a real reason, or is it simply just too easy to ask? Because my concern around Thandi is that because of all of these commitments, she's becoming reliant on short-term debt to help them, and she's not having those money conversations, and she's getting herself into a difficult financial position. So it is vitally important to unpack and understand, why have they become reliant? How much does she have to support not getting herself into debt, and of course having those conversations? But another real scenario would be, as a parent, how do we actually set financial boundaries with our kids? And maybe you can relate to this scenario where your kids constantly asking you for an expensive pair of shoes or accessories. We're currently having this conversation in my household where my matriculant is saying, I really need a new phone, and not what phone. She's very specific. And it is important then to set certain boundaries, because we didn't necessarily plan for that expense at this point in time. So what you could potentially do is just to affirm that desire and say, I acknowledge, I hear you. You would like to have a new phone, for example, or that new pair of sneakers. You know, I understand the reason. Maybe the battery life doesn't last, but is there maybe an alternative? Can we replace the battery? And then maybe I try not to be as negative, so just immediately say, you know, it's not in the budget, or we can't afford it right now. But maybe we could just say, let's look at an alternative solution, and then we plan for a later stage during the year. Your birthday is coming up. Could we potentially take a look at replacing the phone then? But I could also ask the question, and I did ask the question. I said, how much savings do you have, you know, and what are you willing to contribute towards this new phone, whether it is a monthly contract or whatever the case might be. So it's also important to think about some of those unrealistic expectations that very often come our way. And when I think about these unrealistic expectations, it could be where you're getting that last minute phone call. Your friends are going away for the weekend. They're going to Cape Town, let's pretend. And we know how expensive such a trip could be. You love spending time with your friends, but you know you didn't plan for this and you can't necessarily afford this trip. Are you honest and direct by saying, thank you, but next time I need to plan for this. Please just give me fair warning so that I can budget for this. Or are you over enthusiastic and you jump in the car or you book that flight and you know it's going to place yourself in a difficult financial situation? So practice saying no, practice saying I've got to set these boundaries. And then, of course, it comes to that bill when you're out with your friends. If you know that you're going to attend that evening, what is the boundary? Set it up front and say, let's just agree, everybody's paying for themselves. Are we splitting it equally? You don't want to be in a situation where you are left with the bill and you can't necessarily afford it. And I think the final points I want to bring across, and this is something that we often get faced with, is around some of these situations when it comes to the pressure of coping with multiple generations, whether it is from young adult kids to extended family members. Be honest. How much can you afford? What can you contribute? What would be some of those boundaries that you need to set? And I think Joe's scenario is very similar to that of Tandi, where supporting multiple generations, getting themselves into debt, missing payments. Please remember that that's not the best way to do it. Always take a look at what can I afford? Am I getting myself into debt to help this family member? What can I do differently? And then, of course, we've got to remember when we are faced with some of those scenarios around those emotional situations that we find ourselves in. Is it emotional blackmail? When do I say no? When do I agree to it? For example, if you find yourself in a situation where there is illness or there's a death in the family, do you find yourself where family members are reaching out to you because you are the only one working or you're generating an income? And where do you set the boundary? Can you afford to pay for that whole service? Or can you say, as a family, let's get together, let's connect and see how can we potentially split some of these expenses? Because we so often come across this from a coaching perspective where people are overcommitting, relying on debt in order to please the family members. And I guess this could link into whether it's that expectation around a celebration, buying a home, buying a car, having this conversation with your partner and spouse. What is realistic? What can we afford? What can we not afford? And also planning for those unplanned events, because that, of course, is one of the biggest area that people struggle with. So I'm wrapping up, and I'm sorry, I know that I've taken my full hour, but I can still have this conversation with you for the next 30 minutes. But use some of the tools that's available to you. Take a look at your payslip, understand your budget, look at those bank statements. What would be some of those expenses that you can cut back on? And then, of course, remember, reach out and speak to a financial coach or mentor. If you're already part of the Yellow program, please reach out through your dedicated access points. If not, reach out. I'm going to pause it right there. Thank you so much for your time and your wonderful engagement. I'm handing back to you.
Thank you, Leona, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining the session today and for such great engagement levels. I think everyone can take a little bit away from this session and start having those important money conversations. And then I would like to say thank you again for starting the year off with a bang with us, and we will see you in exactly a month's time on the 10th of March at 1 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.